All right. Hey, my friends, welcome to the podcast. Really appreciate you guys so much for taking the time to check out this episode. I'm really just blessed and honored to be able to welcome back to the podcast for the second time Michael Gier, who is an award winning director and producer, as well as a television and film actor. Michael, since 2009, has directed and produced hundreds of video and film projects. His recent documentaries include Wounded Heroes and Healing the Heroes of 9/11, both of which are award winning films in which Michael highlights the stories of amazing veterans and first responders, as well as successful alternative treatments for those battling with post traumatic stress. So it's really, again, just a blessing and an honor to invite Michael Gier back to the podcast for the second time. Michael, welcome back, man. Round two. Let's go.
Yeah,
Appreciate you for being here. Thanks for coming back on.
absolutely. My pleasure.
So good. So I just first am curious. It's been a little while since we've really talked and had an opportunity to conversate this way, other than like little maybe little messages here and there or whatever. But what's new? Is there anything new? Like what's going on? Any new projects or anything in the works right now
Yeah. So my
that you can
production
talk
company.
about? Yeah.
Exactly. I've got one I can't talk about, but I'll give you some basic details. But my company is Gier Productions, and we're a full service production company. So I do have clients in the corporate world. We do TV commercials, website videos, a lot of nonprofit videos, which I really enjoy doing.
Mm,
And then we also do our films, a lot of documentaries recently, short films with actors, and feature films with actors, which are
okay.
called narrative films. And so I've got three documentaries I'm working on right now. There's
Mm,
just one I can't talk about. It's a feature film. I've been filming the last little over a year all over the country,
wow.
and we've done amazing interviews for this very impactful film that will be released, believe it or not for a little while, not this year, not next year, but down the
Mm,
road. But it's going to be a very large release, very impactful film, and I'm excited about it. I've got another film I'm doing just on the side. It's regarding suicide and suicide prevention, and really what happens to
mm,
those who are left behind. I'm hoping that as people see the consequences of their choice to take their lives, not to make them feel bad, but just to
mm,
realize what they're doing to their loved ones, maybe they'll
wow.
reconsider, maybe they'll reach out, maybe they'll get help. So that's another film I'm working on. And then I don't know if you know this artist. His name is Fatboy Slim.
Oh yeah.
And do you know his name? Okay, so his
Sure.
real name is Norman Cook, but his he goes by Fatboy Slim.
Hmm.
So he's been around for quite a few years. He's
Oh yeah.
still touring and selling out crowds of 15,000 plus. And my wife and I just saw him this last weekend here in
It's
LA
amazing.
because we're friends. So we got us backstage. We got to hang out with him, and he and I talked in his dressing room because we're working on a project as well that we hope to release. So years ago, 20th anniversary or 25th? Well, in '99, his song "Praise
Yeah.
You" was released, and
Yeah, I remember that.
yeah, and there's a really hokey, goofy music video that became a huge worldwide success that I happen to be in as one of the
Hmm.
Torrance community dancers. So I've been friends with Norman's ever since then, and this video became a worldwide success. As I said, we performed live on the MTV Awards, and the anniversary is coming up. So I contacted Spike Jones, who directed it, and Norman, Fatboy Slim, and said, "Hey, I want to do a documentary. What do you guys think?" And they said yes. So
Cool.
we're pursuing that. But Spike Jones is really incredibly busy right now. So and once I get his interview, that's day one of production. So that's a big project I'm excited about with Norman's fans all over the world, still young and old. It'll be a great documentary. The main focus is really going to be the song "Praise You" and
Okay.
the music video that
That
became
was a
literally.
worldwide phenomenon
It
that
was,
came out of
yeah.
nowhere, I guess, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I thought it would be great to, of course, tell a little bit about Norman in his career, how he got to where he got, and then just how life-changing Praise You was. And then, of course, the whole story behind Praise You is we were all, nobody knew this at the time, but we were all professional actors and dancers, professional dancers. And
Hmm.
to get the job, we had a huge major dance audition here in Hollywood. But Spike Jones, who's an Academy Award-winning writer, but he's been nominated. He's an actor in major feature films. I mean, the guy's
Yeah.
got an amazing career. He's won so many awards, but Spike directed it. He was in the video with us, but he wanted to fool the press and the world and make them think we were this little group from Torrance, California, these
Right.
amateurs
Right.
that got to be part of this big video. What nobody knew for a very long time was that we were all professionals and actors putting
Mm.
on these characters. Um, and so we kind of fooled everybody, fooled the world. And
Okay.
so there's a lot of stories behind the scenes that people don't know still on the making of that amazing song. And with all the fans who still love that song and the video, they're going to love the documentary to learn so much about the making of.
Wow. Wow. That sounds like that's gonna be a lot of fun.
It will be.
Um,
I just hope we can get Spike to do the interview because, of course, he's the man. His concept, his idea behind the video, and so we can't really do the video without him. So he's agreed to do it. We just need to have him find some time, and
yeah.
then I'm going to be excited that we'll get to produce it. Until then, we're hoping.
Yeah, man. I mean, that's just a genius thing to do, like what you just said about,
Hmm.
kind of having the actors and people that are real professionals, but kind of acting out a different sort of a thing to kind of, create some kind of a shock and awe experience
Yeah,
and to yeah, that's a really genius thing to do and to be able to pull that off. That's pretty phenomenal.
and that's Spike Jones. I mean, the guy is he does these some would say very quirky that are always very
Mm,
successful because of the genius behind it somehow. It's just
mhm.
amazing what he is able to
Yeah.
create.
Yeah, you have to really be able to understand, I think, the cultural moment, number 1, that
Mhm,
you're in, and then also, like, just the brilliance behind that, the creativity, the wherewithal to pull it off, the way to market it, the way to present
mhm.
everything, like, to be able to pull it off is on such a grand scale.
Yeah.
That's kinda blowing my mind right now. That's a really phenomenal thing. So that sounds like that's gonna be a lot of fun to be able to show that in documentary form. That's really cool.
It will, and of course, it's been fun getting to talk to Norman, about the project and then getting to see him live at his concert, and then he got his backstage passes where we hung out, and then he took us to his dressing room, my wife and I, and we talked about the documentary and plans, and so we had a really good time this weekend. So it's just fun to be pursuing this project that we're all excited to do
Yeah.
as soon as I get the Spike Jones interview.
Come on. Oh, that's so cool. Well, congrats on that, man. That's gonna be a lot of fun. I can't wait to check that out.
Absolutely.
I'm sure it'll come together because you don't back down from from difficulty and from you know what I mean. I know that you go after these things until you get them accomplished.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to seeing that when it's all said and done. Very, very cool, my friend. You mentioned something there and just kind of like I'm kind of sensing a theme a little bit in what we're already talking about, but you mentioned something about some of like the suicide prevention stuff that you've been a part of, and of course the two documentaries that I mentioned in the introduction, Wounded Heroes and Healing the Heroes of 9/11, where we really focus on PTS veterans, first responders,
Mhm.
those that have really put themselves in harm's way and into these experiences where they've been there as heroes to serve and to protect, and the traumatic stuff that comes along with that and the PTS and the way that you've highlighted some of these alternative forms of treatment that have been very, very successful at really helping people to get their lives back. It's amazing. I actually rewatched again Healing the Heroes of 9/11 just kind of in preparation for our conversation today. I wanted to be refreshed on it because it'd been, I think, over a year since I saw it the first time. I mean, it's incredible. It's phenomenal. First of all, it's phenomenal. I know you had to put that one together in a very short period of time,
Mhm.
and it's just a beautiful film. And I'm wondering if you ever, because it's interesting how something happens, for one reason or another, we're kind of like pulled in a direction of life. And now it seems like you're doing this kind of stuff all the time. I saw something on your social media where you were, forgive me, I don't remember. I can't remember offhand what it was, but just recently where you were participating in, or you were at an event where it was a swim. It was like a 3.3
Mm.
mile swim.
Yep.
Anyway, you can explain what it was, but
Yeah.
anyway, like you're very much involved in this world of highlighting these alternative forms of treatment, and talking to veterans and first responders, and helping just people deal with
Mhm.
these things and these issues that are just like plaguing our country and people around the world right now. Like, did you ever see yourself, like, let's say 5 years ago, as involved in this kind of stuff as you are now?
So, no, absolutely not. And when I started
Mm.
the project Wounded Heroes, which was my first documentary on post traumatic stress, my first documentary and on post traumatic stress, I knew nothing about post traumatic stress. And so it was a big
Mhm.
project for me. And I was planning to do a film called Wounded Heroes with actors. And it had a storyline about post traumatic stress. I didn't know anything about it. So I thought I'd interview some people who were battling post traumatic stress just so that I could learn. And
Yeah.
when I met this guy in San Diego named Carl on 30, no, wait a minute, I think it was 18 medications. When he and I talked, they had
Oh,
just
mhm.
reduced it. So he was now on 16 medications, but that was like 30 or 40 pills a day. I was
Wow.
shocked. And I thought, how is it possible that somebody can be on that much medication, a young man in his 20s? And
Mhm.
he said it didn't solve the problem. And there were a lot of side effects. So I thought, there has to be something better. So that's why I ended up going the route of the documentary, and one, learning how to produce a documentary since I'd never done that, learning about post traumatic stress, and then putting together an impactful film that could feature successful alternative treatments that would do more than just push back the symptoms. We wanted to find things
Mm.
that would actually solve the problem. And it was a 3-year project. And it was, when I watched the film today, because we still do screenings and events and things, and I'll be asked to come out and speak and do a Q&A afterwards. And I'm not saying this, I'm just blown away by the film. I don't even
Mm.
know how I produced it now. All I remember is being for 3 years in the midst of it and all the work that it took, and during the edit,
Wow.
putting all the pieces and puzzle pieces, there were a lot of great information, hours and hours and hours of footage, finding the right things, putting them in the right order, in the right context to tell the impactful message that you do and can get past post-traumatic stress, that there is hope.
Mm.
And it was really a really difficult film to produce, a rewarding film to produce because it saved and changed
Yeah.
so many lives all over the country.
Mm.
But I feel like God must have helped me along the way, because I look at it and I don't, I really, it's so complex. I'm like, how in the heck did I produce that? Honestly. And it
Right.
has won awards, but it's an amazing film. And my camera, my monitor here keeps going out, so I don't know if the lighting
The light,
changes.
yeah.
Yeah, I guess
It's
because it's
it's
going
fine, don't
into,
even worry about it.
yeah, I'm like, "What? Stop it." But, so, yeah, I'm just really blessed that I get to be part of that film, and that did open up other doors. That's how 220, they contacted me and asked them to produce, Healing the Heroes of 9/11 for them,
Mhm.
because they had seen Wounded Heroes and its impact, and I'd interviewed Dan Jarvis in Wounded Heroes because of a successful treatment that he found that changed his life dramatically. He then
Mhm.
created 220 and had an alternative treatment that they were really focused on, that really had
Yeah.
making major differences in people's lives. And so they asked me to produce a film specifically regarding their treatment of TRP, trauma resiliency protocol. And it was a
Wow.
very impactful film. And then I ended up meeting a lot of people in the first responder world. I've got fire chiefs all over the country and internationally that are now friends, police chiefs. I've got generals at the very top of the military.
Mm.
I've got
Yeah.
retired 3-star generals that are close friends now. I never dreamed I'd meet and work with these people, special forces, some of the toughest people I've ever met, that are friends. That, I'm a civilian. I'm just a, kid from San
Yeah.
Diego, and I'm like, I'm meeting these tough dudes, and we're friends and generals. And yeah, no, 5 years ago, never dreamed I'd be doing this, and it's an honor. I respect them all so much, and I'm just proud to have been able to produce a couple of films that are making a difference in their lives.
Mm. Man, that's so cool. It's just really interesting how, we can do something. We, like, as you said, you got called on to do something, and it was something that wasn't really necessarily on your radar, but how
Mm-mm.
it's really kind of shifted the overall direction of your life. And maybe not forever, and maybe not 100%, but like definitely shifted the kind of even like the course of your career and what you've focused on in recent years, as
Mhm.
far as the projects that you've worked on and all that kind of stuff. And it's just so incredible. I think, just from an outsider's perspective, to watch you in this place where you're able to kind of come into this world and come alongside these just incredible men and women that
Mhm.
have served and that are serving, and that are battling with something that so many battle with, and unfortunately so many don't ever get the help that they need. And one of the things that you kind of champion is something I've heard you say, that post-traumatic stress is not, I know you like to, you leave the D off the end, typic
Mhm.
to traditionally it's PTSD, but you say post-traumatic stress is not a disorder. It's actually a normal human response to a traumatic experience, and therefore it can be healed.
Mhm. And again, I've never experienced post-traumatic stress, and I've actually,
Mhm.
again, I do keynote speaking and things now all over the country on this topic because I've learned so much about post-traumatic stress and the successful alternative treatments available, and the steps
Mhm.
that people should take who are battling post-traumatic stress to get their lives back. And so I love going out and speaking, but I spoke at an event, I think it was 2 years ago, and they were really irritated at me for saying, they could be healed. I have an
Yeah.
audience full of post-traumatic stress sufferers, and they literally, I had some come up to me and say, "You need to stop saying that."
Wow.
So
Wow.
I always like to preface it. Look, I have to agree with them that I have never experienced it. I don't know what they're feeling
Mm.
and experiencing, what they've tried that has failed. I understand that they believe that, but I have so many sources of people who are exactly where they are, battling their post-traumatic stress, sometimes many of them even worse than what these people I'm talking to are battling. And yet they tell me, I'm healed. I no longer have it. So
Yeah.
when I say that from the stage, when I say that doing interviews, I'm speaking with what they've told me, not one person, not two people, dozens and dozens and dozens all over the country. I have people who had post traumatic stress featured in Healing the Heroes of 9/11, who before the film
Mm.
were battling post traumatic stress. After the film, some of them saw significant improvements. Others said they are healed. Johnny Walker being one. He constantly reaches out to me and 220 and says, "Thank you for having me in this film. Thank you for changing my life. Thank you for
Wow.
getting post traumatic
Wow.
stress out of my life." And he's a CEO of a company now. Well, he was then too, but it's a very successful company, and he's doing a lot of great things. But the bottom line is, he says he now has his life back. He has his relationship with his family, his kids, his wife,
Mm.
so much better and back where it should be, because the battle with post traumatic stress, he says, is gone. He's just one of many examples. So when I say people can be healed, they're the ones I'm pointing to who say they've been healed. But I will also say I understand that there are others who don't believe that, and I can understand them getting frustrated with me. So I don't want
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
I don't want to give people false hope. So I rarely
Sure.
say it heals today. Today, when I speak, I say significantly improves, so that
Mm.
they're at least
Okay.
looking for an improvement. If by chance they do get healed, which they'll know, well, then they can say it. I'm going to just call it significantly improving, just in case for some reason they're not healed. I don't want them to be disappointed. I'd rather them go, "Wow, I got more than I expected. I'm healed," So that's kind of the direction I go now. But there
Cool.
are those who are healed, and there are those who just see significant improvement. Either way, it's a win-win. It's wonderful for their lives.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for helping me with the language there as well. And that's
Mm,
one of the things I'm always trying to find, like, better better ways to express things, because yeah, with all of that, it's like everybody's experience is different, and I do understand where some people would for sure be coming from on that, of me being irritated or being like, well, you don't
mhm,
understand my story. And
mhm.
it's kind of the tension. I find that, that tension a lot of times too. I think even as a pastor, and I'm somebody who, like, I believe in the power of God to heal as well. I also believe in,
Yeah.
medicine and doctors and
Mhm,
treatments and these other things as well. I think that these things can and should coexist. But it's one of those things, like, I mean, it's something I talk about a lot, and we pray for people a lot, and we, believe God for miracles and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, like, there's still people that for whatever reason, and I don't know how to explain it, that don't get healed. And like, if we
Mhm.
have a room and there's people, some people are getting healed and some people are not. It's like, well, how do you explain that? It's like, well, I know that God heals. Like, I know that I've
Mm.
seen him do it. Like, I've
Mhm.
witnessed it, I've experienced it, I've seen him do it. And then at the same time, like wanting to be sensitive to those that, maybe haven't experienced it yet. And so I
Mhm.
can I can kind of relate to that tension there that you're talking about.
Yeah. And, going along with that whole healing thing, that's got to be tough. And, as humans, God's ways, I know we're living in a sinful world, obviously. And there's things going to be a whole lot different when we're standing before God and we're in
Mhm.
heaven living that
For
life.
sure.
But it is interesting that you have people, even maybe Christians, non-Christians, whatever, who get healed and others who don't. And those who don't are probably going, what the heck? What about me?
Right. Right.
What did I do? But you know what? It's like, it's one of those
Yeah.
things where I do know that God heals. It's amazing. I know stories. I've got a woman who I know, she had ALS, which literally just weeks away from dying, and God healed her. That is an incurable disease.
That's
That is
amazing.
something you do
Yes.
not heal from. She was in a wheelchair saying goodbye to people at work because she knew she wouldn't be back. She wasn't working. She'd go back in every so often in her wheelchair. She couldn't walk. So she had to be carried and put into a wheelchair just to
Wow.
get around. But she was at work,
Mm.
and I was going to do a documentary on it, and it ended up not happening. She speaks all over the
Mm.
country about what happened with her life, all 10, 12 years later, after being diagnosed and having ALS. But she's in her wheelchair saying goodbye to people. And she said she felt this dramatic urge to stand up. And she's like, I can't stand up. What's going on? But the urge to stand up was just really getting to her. So she was like, fine. And she stood up and she's like, oh my God, what just happened? And then she took one little tiny step and then a second tiny step. And then she literally was running up and down her workplace saying, oh, God just healed me. I'm healed. I'm healed. Well, these are people who saw her get diagnosed. They saw her decline. They saw her knowing she's on her deathbed. She had shriveled up to being just bones in a wheelchair, couldn't walk. And this happened in front of, she's a Christian, but happened in front of all these non-Christians in her workplace. God healed her from an incurable disease weeks from her death, weeks to a couple of months, I think is what she told me. So God heals, but I also know others who had ALS. Every other person I know who's had ALS didn't make it. Why her? Why not them? So we can't answer those questions, but you know what? God has a plan. I think that we shouldn't expect healing in a sense that we don't deserve it. It is not why me, why them, why them instead of me. It's none of that. If I get anything, I'm just like, it is life is life. I got it. I'm going to deal with it. God, if you happen to want to heal me, great, but I'm not going to expect it. That's God's choice. And if not, I'll stand before him in heaven sooner and be very happy about it. But I don't think we should get bitter if God doesn't, is my point. If God doesn't heal us and he healed somebody else, it's like God's ways are his ways. And whenever I get to see him, regardless of how it comes, you know what, I'm going to love him all the way there, even if he chooses not to heal me.
I appreciate your perspective there. I was just gonna say that I think I'm a little bit different on
Mhm.
that word, the word that you use, expect, or the
Mm,
expectation. I
yeah.
fully agree with what you said about not it's like this thing where we cannot hold God hostage
Mm,
to, "You've gotta heal me,
yeah.
or I'm gonna have a different attitude toward you." We can't hold God hostage
Right.
in that sense, and he doesn't owe us anything. I mean, he's already
Exactly.
given us so much more than we could
Yeah.
ever possibly deserve, and it's not because of anything that I do or that I've done that I deserve to be healed or I
Mm,
should be healed or anything like that. Just to share a different perspective here, my
sure.
my perspective is more like, I believe that we should expect um the supernatural, moving of God, the supernatural power of God in our lives, because I believe we see it. I believe Jesus demonstrated it to us. I believe the
Yeah.
disciples, the apostles, they demonstrated it as well, even
Mhm.
after, the ascension of Jesus, and throughout the early church, throughout the book of Acts, and all of that. And so I think we can expect it, but at the same time, like, I get the perspective there for sure, because it's like, I want to have the expectation
Mhm.
that God is going to perform according to perform. I don't mean that
I
perform
know
like
what you mean.
a
Yeah.
weird way, but yeah, that God is going to do. In other words,
Yeah, yeah.
according to His word, according to the promises of His
Mhm.
word. But at the same time, I love like, and at the way that you wrapped that up at the end of what you said, they reminded me of like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego when they're about to be thrown into the furnace, and they're like we believe that God is going to save us, but they're like, but even if he doesn't, we're
I
still
know.
not
I
going to
love
bow
it.
down. We're still
Yes,
not going to reject. We're still not going to deny him.
absolutely.
And so it's that whole thing. I believe in having a real, strong expectation
Yeah.
of God being true and faithful to his word, and taking those, steps of faith in accordance to, the leading of the Lord in our lives, and all of that. But yeah, 100%. It's like we can very easily, I think that we can unintentionally, like as pastors, as ministers, as those that teach about this stuff, I think that it
Hmm.
happens a lot where I think people get unintentionally led down this path of false hope, or into this place where they develop resentment or something because they then compare themselves because so and so got healed and they didn't.
Hmm.
But at the same time, I believe that because of the finished works of Jesus. So how do I say this? It's all because of him. It's all because
Hmm.
he's good. It's not because I deserve anything.
Right.
And I can't, I think sometimes as Christians, I hear people pray sometimes, and I think I used to do this too, for sure, where we'll pray and be like, God, please heal my friend. He really
Hmm.
loves you. He really has a desire to serve you. He really this and he really that. And it's like very good intention prayer. And it's like, but I don't need to try to get my friend healed, like praying for my friend to get healed on the basis of the good person that he is. It's like, no,
Exactly.
no, no,
Yeah.
that doesn't work. It's God, heal him because you're so good, because you're so powerful, because you know what I mean. And
Yeah.
so, on a serious point here, like one of the things that kind of struck me as I was rewatching the Healing the Heroes of 9/11 documentary, and I'm listening to this gentleman. Forgive me, I don't remember his name, but he's a first responder in the documentary, and he was at the Pentagon. He
Oh,
started
Carlos.
out,
Yeah, Carlos.
Carlos.
Great, amazing
Okay,
story. Yes.
yeah, incredible. And so, but he talked about how, when he was really in the throes of the battle with post traumatic stress, and dealing with all of that trauma, is very, weighing very, very heavily on him. He would, the 9/11 anniversary would be approaching, and of course it's always a big thing. It's in the news,
Yeah.
it's in the media, it's like always being talked about. And for him, he's like, I would have to hide from it,
Hmm.
and kind of shield myself from it, because just seeing it, seeing the memory of it and being reminded
Hmm.
of it, it brings back all of that trauma. And I think about how a lot of times, like Memorial Day, right?
Hmm.
Like we're having barbecues, we're eating burgers and hot dogs, and we're doing pool parties, and we're having fun, and it's great, and it's a holiday, and we're celebrating, and hopefully we're remembering, we're actually taking time to remember those that have paid the ultimate price, and those that have served, and everything. But I've heard this from several people before that are veterans, that are like we don't look at these holidays that you're celebrating and barbecuing, like we don't look at them the same way, because for us
Yeah.
it reminds us of like all the friends that we lost. It
Yeah.
reminds us of the conflict, it reminds us of the trauma, it reminds us of these things. And so, kind of thinking along those same lines as well, like wanting to honor, wanting to celebrate, wanting to memorialize all these things, but at the same time, like I think that sometimes we can do it in an insensitive way, where the very people that we want to honor are almost like being harmed by the way that we're doing it, or the way that we're going about it. I'm just curious, like, is that something that you've thought about? Is that something that comes up? I don't know if you have any kind of thoughts, or tips or pointers, or like
Yeah.
anything like that, to that could maybe help kind of, how we could be a little bit more, sensitive maybe around some of these things.
Yeah, I wish I had an answer for how, because I struggle with that too, and that's something I've learned, as you said, holidays were holidays. We're celebrating what we're celebrating.
Hmm.
We're remembering
Yeah.
9/11. We're remembering any horrific event, but those who experience do see those holidays very differently than what we who have not experienced it do. And I still don't know. Like, even thank you for your service. I've had so many veterans say that irritates them, because it's
Yeah.
become such a flippant, oh, thank you for your service. That's something we just say now, but there's no real meaning. They don't really even understand what that service was and how much it's
Mhm.
impacted their lives. And so it's just, at the same time, I want to make sure they understand I am appreciative of their service. And so I'm still struggling now
Yeah.
with, well, do I say it or do I don't say it?
Yeah.
Because I want you to know, but I also don't want to irritate you, which that does happen at times, I've been told by them,
Mhm.
because we can't relate, you know. But I think thank yous are still important. I think thanking our first responders, our police officers who are and have been under attack for so long and underappreciated. You know, we do have bad cops. We have bad people in
Sure.
every part of life.
Mhm.
Politicians, everybody, you know, producers,
Plumbers, I mean,
Hollywood. I mean, it doesn't
everything.
matter where you
Yeah.
go. You know, there's bad people. Yeah. So,
Mhm.
but that doesn't mean they all are in the police and in law enforcement. And I think it's wrong
Yeah.
to give it a blanket, you know, negativity. And so I want them to feel appreciated. And so we go out of our way to
Absolutely.
let them and firefighters, 911 operators, prison guard, anybody who's in that very difficult, our doctors and nurses, you know, what they deal with, they battle post-traumatic stress. Their suicide rates are very high.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people in that whole first responder world, 911 operators, if I didn't say that, that have strong suicide. They all need to feel appreciated. They all need to realize there is hope that they can get their lives back if they are battling post-traumatic stress. And so I'll tell you, let me give my website because all of my films you can get access to through
Mhm.
michaelgier.com. And it's my
Please.
first name, Michael, last name, Gier, Gier.com. There's Wounded Heroes, there's Healing the Heroes of 9/11. You can also send an email through the contact form on the website. But there's a lot of resources, and I'm happy to help with any of those. WoundedHeroesDocumentary.com is the Wounded Heroes, and it has a resource page with all kinds of great alternative treatments that are successful and help people get their lives back.
Mm.
So people can go there and just look at some of those without even having to watch the films if they want to. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's crazy. So you're right on with how people feel who've experienced it versus us who are just celebrating a holiday. And I don't have an answer.
Yeah. 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 I'm because yeah, again, it's like I'm always wanting to be. Yeah,
Sensitive
as you
and yeah,
said, yeah, yeah, and you wanna be sensitive, and you also do, you wanna honor, you wanna honor them, and you want to let them know, like, "Hey, I know this part doesn't mean much, but thank you." Like,
yeah.
honestly, from a I think there's probably a flippant way that we could do it, just like,
Hmm.
"Thank you for your service," and
Hmm.
then and I do, I mean, if you hear it, like, you hear it all the time, and it's like, you don't even know what you're saying, like, how that could definitely be
Yeah.
irritating
Especially
to
when they're battling post-traumatic stress and they're carrying
for
those
sure,
scars with
for
them and those
sure.
emotional things. And then to have some come up and say, thank you for your service. It just, even though we mean it right, it just hits them wrong sometimes. Not all the time, but it hits them wrong. You
Mhm.
know, I know Vietnam veterans who love it when you walk up and we say, "Oh my gosh, you're a Vietnam veteran. Thank you so
Mm,
much. What, welcome back." Because a lot of them were not welcomed back. And it
yeah,
means everything to them to hear "welcome back," because that what they were spit at. They had eggs thrown at them. They were treated
mm,
incredibly bad when they came home, and there was no welcome back. And so that's an important thing, I think, to let them know, we appreciate you and welcome back,
yeah.
So yeah, got to
Are
think of
are
it
you
from
are
where they're
you
coming from.
aware of anything of, like, any kind of, like, preventative stuff that's in the ether, like, that's in the protocol for, like, let's say a soldier coming back, after having served and served and probably seen some horrific things and all that kind of stuff, and coming back home. I know that that's always something that's talked about, is the
Hmm.
how hard that is, how hard
Yeah.
that transition is
Hmm.
back to normal life for many different reasons. For many different reasons, one reason being because maybe they've had years where they've barely seen their spouse, they've barely seen their kids grow up.
Yeah.
Maybe there's distance there, maybe there's resentment there, maybe there's conflict there. But also just like the camaraderie of like being there
Yeah.
with your brothers, sisters that you're serving with, and kind of being like these are the most important people, like, because around me, because we're literally protecting each other, we're literally saving each other's lives, like
Yeah.
we're literally there depending on one another in the most profound way imaginable. And then like transitioning back outside of that, like there's so many different factors that go in, let alone the trauma, let alone the
Hmm.
things that we're experienced that that are flashing through their head as they're trying to fall asleep at night, and like all these different kinds of things. And I think from what I've heard, like there's not a whole lot that goes into like, okay, you're coming back home, like
Yeah.
let's help you transition and
Hmm.
understand some of the psychological effects of this, some of the stuff that's going to go on, some of the things. And so I'm just wondering, like, are you aware of anything like that that's in place? I'm sure there's alternative programs or third party programs and
Right.
things like that that people can get involved in, but just as far as like in the actual protocol of what's done. And I guess I'm curious, like if you are aware of what it looks like, and then kind of if you have any thoughts in your mind of having worked with so many of these veterans and first responders, like if there's anything that you would personally like to see developed or implemented on more of a large scale.
So there's nothing I know of that does it yet. That has been one of the big complaints or suggestions for the military to help that transition,
Okay.
because in the old days it used to be, you're at war and you had a very long time on a ship to get back home, to
Mm,
hang out with your friends, play cards, you're out of the war zone to kind of find yourself again. Because when you're fighting for your life every single day, you're shooting, bombs are coming at you,
yeah.
bullets are coming at you. You need that transitional period. In the old
Yeah.
days, it was a lot better because they were on the boats, as I said, and they had a
Mhm.
transitional period. Now they're home within 24 hours back in the States many times, or they're over
Yeah,
to
that's crazy.
uh, a safe area, not country, a safe country for a short period of time and then back home. But they're just saying the transition from shooting, killing, being attacked, surviving every day, protecting your buddies that are next to you, men and women. And then all of a sudden, the next day you're home at Disneyland.
Yeah, it's
Everything is
so
perfect here
abrupt.
compared to
Yeah.
that. It just gets wonky, and it's just like, what the heck? And then they feel
Mhm.
unnatural here because they've lived so long in that chaos that they desire to go back there and protect their buddies, their fellow soldiers. They don't. What am I doing here, wasting my time in this fairyland? I want to get back where the real action is, so I can help them, protect them, save them, and continue to fight for my
Mhm.
country. There are organizations, as you said, third party, like a couple of weeks ago, you'd mentioned that event I was at. It was in San Diego, the Honor Foundation, and they
Honor
literally
Foundation.
what they do is they help special forces transition out of the military and into civilian life. So they're a great
That's beautiful.
organization, and there's other organizations like that because there is such a need. And one of the biggest complaints is, one, if they're battling post-traumatic stress, they're going to come home and start to isolate, and that's not good. So getting them
Yeah.
into a transition and helping them with the potential post-traumatic stress they may not realize they have, but what signs they can look for, what they should do if they're experiencing those signs, that would be so helpful if they would implement that, the military, as they're coming out. The other thing that's hard is when they're in the military, they're dealing with equipment of millions of dollars that they have at their fingertips, that they're running. They've got, men that they're overseeing, large men
Mhm.
that they're overseeing, large groups of men, not just large men, large groups of
Large men.
men.
It's probably some large men too,
Yeah,
you know?
probably. But if they are, though, they're probably on muscle. That's why they're large.
Exactly.
But and then they come home, and then people just treat them like nobodies, and they can't get anything better than a security job. And they're just like,
Mm.
how did I go from running so much and commanding so many
Wow.
people and operating multi-million dollars of equipment, and now you want to pay me minimum wage to go be a security guard, and that's all I can get? That's incredibly difficult for many of them transitioning. So there's a lot of things that are very difficult transitioning out, and there does need to be more help. And I wish the military would do more. I don't think they have yet, but that's why I think there are nonprofits like the Honor Foundation and others who are helping with that transition.
Yeah, and I think kind of like what you're talking about there is like there's certain things that when it comes to people, particularly I think serving in the military, there's certain things that somebody like me, like a civilian, like I'm just not gonna understand. Like I
Right.
never would have even thought about that, like that
Hmm.
aspect of it, like all this, like the command that you're given, the responsibility that you're given, the leadership that you're given, the authority
Yep.
that you're given, the stuff that you have at your disposal, and the stuff that you're conscious of and aware of and all this stuff. And then it's like this heightened world, like this world of heightened senses and all this kind of stuff. And then like you were gonna just like put you back into a regular like a regular job. We're gonna put you back into civilian life. And it's like, okay, yeah, there's certain things that it's really just impossible for somebody like me to understand and really be able to fully like I think that military personnel, like I think that they really respond well to their peers. And so that's why I think
Yes.
I love, like, one of the things that you mentioned for sure in the Heroes of 9/11, but I'm pretty sure in both of the films
Yeah.
are these kind of like peer programs that
Peer-to-peer
are,
support. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, it's that's
So
so huge.
important.
It's such a big deal. Yeah.
Hmm. And because, one of the things I've heard from many veterans and first responders is that when they go to the usual professional, not that there's anything wrong with the usual professional, but they make
Sure.
a good point. When they go and they're trying to get help from the usual professional, that person doesn't know what they've gone through. They've never experienced it themselves. They're educated in school. They can be very helpful,
Yeah.
but it's hard for the first responder and veteran to trust them when they don't even know what they've experienced and what they're really feeling other than what they've learned in a textbook. And so that's
Sure.
frustrating for them. I had one first responder, a police officer. He went to get help because his post-traumatic stress was so bad. He started telling some stories about what he had experienced on the job, and they were horrific. As he's trying to express it in hopes to help his post-traumatic stress, the professional was like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, wait a minute! I don't want to hear that." She goes, "That's awful. I can't. I don't want to hear that. Please, please
Really?
stop. Don't talk about that." And so he said, I interviewed him. He said on camera, he walked out and and actually that was for 22-0, Healing the Heroes of 9/11. He walked out of that and he goes, "What am I supposed to do?" He goes, "I go to get help. I talk to the professional, but my horror, it was
Wow.
so bad. She didn't even want to hear it. So who am I going to talk to now to get the help I need?" That's why peer-to-peer support is so good, because those
Yes.
who have seen and have progressed to where they no longer have post-traumatic stress and have been healed or have been helped, they have been there. They're now on the other side. So somebody who's battling it currently
Yeah.
can talk to them, but many of the alternative treatments we presented in the films, especially RTM, TRP, ART,
Mhm.
which I don't need to say what they all are, but those are the abbreviations.
Yeah.
They all three, you don't even have to talk about the trauma. They don't want you
It's
to talk
amazing.
about it, not because they don't want to hear it, because it's not needed. You don't need to revisit it. You don't need to think about it. You don't need to have the prolonged exposure therapy that the military, the VA does regularly. For many, I'm sorry, for some it works. For most, it doesn't. It's led
Yeah.
some to suicide, and so most people are not a fan of prolonged exposure therapy. I don't know why the VA still does it,
Mhm.
but you don't have to with many of the alternative treatments we found. They don't even want you to look at it, think about it, talk about it, and yet they can have a significant difference or be healed when they go through these alternative treatments. So it really is amazing, but it is hard
Yeah.
when the person they're talking to has no idea what they've experienced when they're asking them to talk about
Man, there's so
it.
many factors that in the wrong situation could just be working against
Yeah.
somebody really coming to that place of healing, recovery, of, just advancing and experiencing relief from this. I
Hmm.
mean, when you have when you have like the professional in the room saying, "Oh, don't talk to me about that." It's like, well, it's like, hold on, like you want on the one side, if I'm going through the traditional form of quote unquote treatment here, like I have to relive all this just to be able to, kind of deal with and begin to unpack some of this stuff. And maybe
Right.
it helps me a little bit. I don't know. But like now I'm over here and like you don't even want to hear about the thing that I'm telling you that I experienced. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's just it doesn't
Yeah.
add up. It just seems there's so many factors that could be, working against somebody. And I think one of the things that happens, I would just imagine, because I think that human nature is something that we do, is when we have that tendency to isolate,
Hmm.
we tend to think that we're the only ones and that the other people around us, like if you're, let's just say, like in your precinct or in
Yeah.
your firehouse, your what do they call it, firehouse, your
I think it's
station.
yeah.
um anyway, sorry about that. But it's
No,
like,
it's yeah,
it's
I
like
think it's Firehouse too. I was trying to think, what is it? I think it is Firehouse. Yeah.
the people that you're going to work with every day. And, maybe you're sitting there. One of the gentlemen in the movie was talking about how, he was honored in his home state as like the firefighter of the
Oh,
year for the
firefighter of the
entire
year. Yeah.
firefighter of the year for the whole state. And
Gutsy.
meanwhile, he's like smoking weed just to get through the day
And to
because,
get to sleep at night, even at the
yeah,
firehouse. He was smoking weed just to
exactly.
fall asleep. And
Exactly.
that's what he said. Here I am, firefighter of the year, and I'm
Yeah.
smoking weed just to
Yeah.
get by and just to fall asleep.
Exactly.
Because of
Exactly.
post-traumatic stress. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's like, he probably has people right around him that could very much, like, sympathize and empathize with what he's feeling, if not themselves, like, feeling the exact same way. But
Yep.
it's like, because of this standard that I have to uphold, I feel like I
Yep.
have to kind of push this down. And we're talking about, men and women that are in these positions that are like,
Yeah.
traditionally very just like strong. I mean, you've got to be
Absolutely.
mentally strong. You've got to have that mental toughness to decide that you're going to go into the military, to decide that you're going to
Mhm.
be in emergency medical personnel, or whatever. Like, you've got to kind of have that. And so I think you go in with this thinking of it's going to be one thing, but I think you kind of go in already kind of, as much as you can, maybe mentally preparing yourself for knowing that it's going to be tough and it's going to be challenging. But like, I don't think at the end of the day, anybody, no matter how strong they are, is fully equipped to deal with all of those things that come their way. Certainly not equipped to deal with them by themselves in a vacuum. I don't think humans are
Absolutely.
intended
Yeah.
to deal with these things on our own. So anyway, I just think that, the kind of like talking about the peer-to-peer stuff, but even like interdepartmental, like peer-to-peer stuff, where it's like, hey, if we could have these programs in place, like here, where we could actually share. Because I know one of the things that happens is, particularly with law enforcement, it's like fear to talk about what they're feeling, for fear that they're going to lose their job, or fear that they're going to be put on a desk, or fear that whatever. Because if your superiors know that you're functioning at like 30% or 40% of, where you should be, like, they might not want you out there. And so it's
Mhm.
like the different fears that go into this. Again, there's just so many things that could be potentially um, working against somebody actually coming to that place. But I do think that when we're able to expose people to, systems like this, where they can be vulnerable, where they can talk, where they can, experience
Mhm.
this. But I think, and this is the pastor coming out of me, but it's like, the more that we can do this, like, in community,
Mhm.
recognizing, like, you are definitely not the only one. Like, you are definitely not the only
Absolutely.
one feeling what you're feeling, battling with what you're battling. But again, sometimes the system just doesn't have, it's not set up in a way where, they feel like they can have that freedom
Mhm.
to really talk.
Well, that's why I think it's really important, and I tried to point this out in both films. Again, as you mentioned earlier, it's a normal reaction to a traumatic event. So when they experience it, if they don't know that, they're thinking, "I'm weak." Man or woman, I'm
Yeah.
weak. And in the military, you're taught to be strong. And first responders, they're told, man up, woman up, whatever
Mm,
you want to say. Don't be. They use different words, but the bottom line is weak.
sure.
You know, yeah, I'm being polite, as you know, but don't be weak because they consider it a weakness. But no, it's not a weakness. That's the whole thing. It's a normal. That's the key word, capital NORMAL, reaction to a
Hmm.
traumatic event. So you shouldn't isolate, keep it quiet, be afraid to tell your peers. Now, I do understand you have to be smart because you don't want to tell your peers and all of a sudden it goes to your superiors and they all of a sudden say you can't work. We're taking your gun away. We're going to release you from the military dishonorably with discharged. But again, because there are alternative treatments and peer-to-peer support out there, you can get
Yeah.
help without having to go to your superior or to HR. The bottom line is don't
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
isolate,
Yeah.
don't pull back, don't
Yeah.
self-medicate with drugs, alcohol, pot, whatever, just to get through. It's going to get worse and worse and worse, and it's going to
Yeah.
destroy your life. And so there are things like 220 and other organizations that people can reach out to and get help without anybody knowing you're getting help, and you're dealing with
Mm.
a peer who understands where you're coming through from, and you don't have to talk about the traumatic events, but you still see significant improvement or you're healed. And so there are options for people who are in their current workplace without having to be
Yeah.
afraid. The bottom line is, as you said, just don't withdraw, don't isolate, and don't do nothing,
Mm.
because it will get worse. Deal with it as it happens through organizations like 220.org.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for mentioning that. I was just gonna ask, for the website, so 22, that's the number 22, and then the
Hmm.
word 0, right?
Yeah,
ZERO.org.
absolutely.
What
And there
what
are
w
other
there
options, of
Yeah.
course, but they're ones
Yeah,
I
is
really
there
like.
anything else, like, while we're here, while we're on this, is there anything else that you would mention, just as like, a place people can go for resources and more information, either if they're themselves are personally in it, or we probably all know somebody, that
Yeah.
that's in it. And so,
Hmm.
just for us to kind of be aware, is there anything else that you would mention there as a good
Well,
places to
there's so
go?
many options. What I'd love is
Yeah.
people can watch the film 22-0, The Healing Heroes of 9/11. The film is available online for free, so they can watch that and learn about TRP, which is what they do. Wounded Heroes features a lot of other options, and it's available online on Amazon, iTunes, Google Play. You can contact me, and I'll send you a free link to watch it. If you go to michaelgier.com again, then you
Yeah.
can contact me there. If you want to reach out to me through my website, you can also just tell me your situation, and I'll suggest, something that may be most
Mm.
appropriate for you. I get calls like from Carlos. You mentioned Carlos earlier, who was in Healing the Heroes of 9/11. His post-traumatic stress was so bad, and he was running from it, as you said, and from 9/11, that he moved to Japan just to, as you probably know,
Mm.
watching the film, but for those who don't, he moved to Japan. He said, I didn't want to speak the
Mhm.
language. I didn't want to be able to read anything. I didn't want to be
Wow.
at a place where they're going to play think anything about 9/11. And he goes, so I could just live in my own little world and
Wow.
not be able to be distracted with reading and people talking and people looking. He goes, I was in my own little bubble. And he was very happy there. And he could not go back to the Pentagon. He hadn't gone back. And then after he went through TRP, on the 20th anniversary, he went back to the Pentagon with his two boys, big smile on his face. And he told me, he goes, and I felt great while I was there. So then, I'm telling you the story for a reason. Just a few weeks ago, he sent me out of the blue a message, text message, and he goes, Michael, he goes, this is Carlo. And he goes, it's been 2 years and I'm still doing great because of the film and TRP and what you guys did for me. And he goes, I've got a friend who just called me, and he goes, he's even worse than I was. And he goes, I just want to see, can you help him get some help? And so I contacted the guy and put him in touch with 22-0, and he's already gone through TRP, and I've reached out to him again saying, how are you doing? He said, I'm
Wow.
sleeping so much better already, and he's already seeing significant difference in his life. And so I'm not sure where I was leading, but that's still a great story. But so that's what I was going to say. So if you contact me, my point is, if you reach out to me through michaelguyer.com and contact me, I can definitely introduce you to and give you resources that can help you, and steps you
Wow.
can take that'll help you with the post-traumatic stress.
Wow, that's so cool. I can't remember the details, but I remember there was a section in the film, "Healing the Heroes of 9/11," where somebody was talking, and I think they were talking about Dr. Janelle Royster. Forgive me if this is a different section and I'm mixing some
Mm,
things up, but where they said they were basically like grabbed by 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 this doctor, like where they were, like in the
yes,
hallway, sat
yes.
down, and like they went through, one of the protocols. I'm not sure which one it was, and it was like right there they immediately started feeling relief. I'm like, that's incredible, like how quickly that and I don't know for sure if that happens that way for everybody, but it
Mhm.
was amazing to hear how
Yeah.
quickly it was that they started to experience like not 100% like better all of it all at once, but like a very quick turnaround and very quick results.
So I'll tell you his story because his story is amazing. And they were at a police officer weekend event, convention or something, and the guy was in really, really bad shape. He said he
Mm,
was operating maybe at 25%. His life, because of post-traumatic stress, that of what he experienced as a police officer, he was just falling apart. His family life, his job life, his performance on the job, everything was a disaster. His boss, who I also interviewed, said he didn't know it at the time, but he said he was going to be fired soon if we didn't see some
mm,
kind of a significant change because he
yeah.
was such a disaster. And we were at this event, and 22-0 was there, and Dr. Royster was working with him at the time, and they somebody said you need to go talk to 22-0 and Dr. Royster, since she was there to help with TRP, trauma resiliency protocol. And he said, "Oh, I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm not going to talk to anybody about that." He's fine. Really? I mean, the guy's life was falling apart, but sometimes
Right.
people won't recognize it. They ignore it. Anyway,
Yep.
they said you need to go see her. And I don't know if it was a superior or who it was, but they're like, you're not getting out of this. You need to go talk to her.
Mm,
And so he said, fine. So he went and he ran through the protocol, maybe 30 minutes, 40 minutes, without talking about any of the trauma again. You don't have to talk about it.
yeah.
And I interviewed him, and you
Oh.
just see the sincerity in his face and the relief in his body. He said, "They saved my life." He goes, "I was suicidal. I don't know if how much longer I would have lasted." He said, "Everything in my life was falling apart." And he said, "That one session saved my life, changed
Hmm.
everything for me."
Wow.
And it's such a powerful story. And then I think they maybe ran him through a second and third time. But what is that? An hour and a half to 2 hours of your time. And they do it for free for veterans and first responders, which is another amazing thing. So he spent an hour and a half, couple of hours, saved his life, kept his
Wow.
job performance went back up, his relationships were rebuilt. And now when he experiences a difficult time on the job, which they all still do daily usually, they can run with a
Yeah.
peer-to-peer support, and run through the protocol, the TRP protocol, with each other, because 220 has been teaching people,
Mm.
fire stations, firefighters, police officers, police stations all across the country, how to do the protocol themselves, so that when
Mm.
someone says, "You know what, I was in a whatever, this just happened traumatic today, let's run through TRP tonight," and then they'll run them through it because they've been trained,
Wow.
and then they no longer have to deal with that. It's no longer building blocks of post-traumatic stress aren't building up, building up, building up, and then they crack. Not when I
Wow.
say crack, it's usually one event that takes them over the edge where it really becomes impactful on their lives. They don't have to. That doesn't have to happen, because as those traumatic things
Wow.
happen, they've got a peer, their buddy right next to them. HR doesn't need to know. The superior doesn't need to know. Who just runs them through TRP, and a half hour later, they're like, "Woo, feel better. Great, let's move on."
Whew.
So it's really spectacular what is out there, and the things that are working. And again, I love TRP, and I do love 22 There are other options. So, I don't
Sure.
want to make it
Sure.
sound like, they're the only option, but they
Sure.
are the ones I usually send people to.
Yeah, and I think that was the same gentleman in the video who also said that he didn't even have to believe it for it. Like he didn't have to
Yeah,
believe that it was gonna work for it
he
to
didn't
work. Like he
believe
was
it.
sitting there all skeptical.
Yeah,
He's like, I didn't
skeptical,
have
and
to
it still
talk about
worked.
my trauma. He's like, I didn't even have to believe in it, and it still worked. Like I was like,
Yeah.
wow, that's a pretty
So I got trained in it, in TRP, and one of the things that they do as part of the training is they make you run through TRP. They have you think about something in your life that's really bugged you or bothered you, or that has stayed with you, even if it's from childhood. And so
Mhm.
all of us who've been trained, we've experienced it, and it really is fascinating. Something like one of my biggest devastations and the hardest time of my life was my divorce, years
Mm.
ago. I've been happily married now for 21 years with my second wife, but the divorce, it was awful. But
Sure.
they ran me through TRP in regards to that, and it really is amazing. When I think back, it's like I remember it now, but there's no emotion, there's no guilt, there's no, it's just separated. And that's what the protocol does. RTM does the same thing, reconsolidation of traumatic memories. And then there's ART, accelerated resolution therapy. They do the same thing
Mm.
as TRP, which is you've got the memory and the emotions associated with it. And so they
Right.
run you through the protocol so that you can separate the emotion from the memory, and then your brain processes everything where it's supposed to go. So now you can remember those things that were so traumatic and devastating in your life, but there's no longer that negative memory that goes along with it,
Yeah.
emotion that goes along with it.
Mhm.
The emotion's gone. And so you can think about it. You can think about, as Johnny Walker said, 9/11 and everything experienced, Carlos at the Pentagon. They remember it. They can think about it. But now they can go back to those places. They can think about them. And that
Mm.
negative emotion that used to be attached to those memories is gone. So it's now just a memory without the traumatic, when I say traumatic emotion that was attached, that was
Yeah.
what's keeping them up night after night, and causing them to
Mm.
drink and self-medicate them. That's all
Right.
gone now, and that's how they get their lives back. And so it's a very shockingly
Yeah.
simple process. It's a neurological intervention, and it's
Mm.
pretty amazing. But I experienced it, and you can't even. It's so simple to go through the process, and yet the results are so amazing. It's kind of, it's like a miracle. It's shocking. Your brain just
Mhm.
reprocesses things, and you're like, oh, I can think about that. I'm no longer guilty. I feel guilty. It's really
Yeah.
fascinating.
Yeah. That's incredible. That's incredible. I was just thinking about that, like when you were talking about, you know, you and now that after somebody, let's say somebody who's gone through the training and they know how to do it and they can do kind of peer to peer. sit through and process these things together, and go through this. And it's like, okay, so you just had a very tough tour, you had a very
Yeah.
traumatic experience tonight or whatever, so let's sit down and do this. It's like the alternative of that, of recognizing, we just went through something traumatic, so let's sit down together and let's do this, as opposed to what a lot of times happens is, let's go out and like get drunk, like let's go out and do
Exactly.
this, like let's
Yeah.
go out and you know what
Yeah,
I'm saying, like
exactly.
it's like the alternative of like, hey, we can actually do something where we could take care of this, we could help each
Mhm.
other, and
Yeah.
we can keep going, and you actually feel better when it's over.
And when they ask if they understand it's a normal reaction, they won't have to feel weak when they ask,
Mm,
because they're
yeah.
not weak. And again, I want to go back and talk about, like, the three-star general I know, Frank Labudi. I was just talking to him this morning. The guy's career was huge. He's a three-star. Can't talk. I'm talking too fast. Three-star general, and the man was in charge of major military operations all over the world. And
Mm.
he battled post-traumatic stress, and he now runs a nonprofit. He's a CEO, which is horse therapy, and he's been through the
Oh yeah.
program himself. But as a three-star general, who is a man's man, who was at the very top of leadership, commanding thousands and thousands of soldiers all over the world, for him to admit. Then there's General Don Bolduc, another person that I know, and he's got a service dog, and he also is willing to admit he has post-traumatic stress. They admit it because they want the other soldiers, men and women that are serving in the military or first responders or anybody, to realize, look, I'm a general. Look at everything I've accomplished in my life in the military, and I can admit it's okay to say you need to get help. So go get help, because I did. And I'm doing
Yeah.
much better now. So you guys do the same thing. You're not weak. And that needs to be the new
Yes.
message, because there are still supervisors and military officers telling their people, suck it up. You're weak. Don't be one of those. Don't embarrass me. Don't embarrass yourself.
Yeah.
Don't embarrass your family. Whatever they say, that is the wrong message. That's killing people, because they get so bad, many of them. That's why we have a high suicide rate in all of those worlds: veteran, active duty military, first responder, even healthcare. Like I said, there's just too
Yep.
many suicides because of that attitude of suck it up. No, it's a normal reaction. So feel free to get help. And I love and appreciate these leaders who have admitted that they've battled it and that they did get help, because that encourages others to get help, and that lowers our suicide rate.
Amen to that, man. Yeah, I think that's such a big piece of this puzzle, is calling this thing what it is, and putting it in its rightful place, and not putting it out there as some, like, if you like, oh, you PTSD, like putting it out there as like this stigmatized
Hmm.
sort of thing. It's like, well, if I associate with that, then I'm one of those people. It's like, the idea of, and I mean, in recent years, for sure, the conversation around mental health has gotten way better, way more accessible. A lot more people
Yep.
are talking about it. But yeah, I mean, it's just an area that's still very stigmatized, in a lot of different ways. And I think probably more so in, as you're talking about these kinds of professions. But when we recognize, like, any person on this planet can experience this, we can all experience trauma, and we can
Absolutely.
all have a negative, mental, cognitive, neurological response to it. And so, like, to stigmatize these things is just, I mean, it's silly. Like, it's completely unnecessary. We did that I mean, it was done in the church for a long time, and it still is, but it's gotten a lot better. But I mean, for a long time in the church, like, to talk about mental health, it was like, well, you're either emotional or you're demon possessed. And it's like, well, hold on, like, like, maybe I'm actually struggling with something, and like,
Yeah.
maybe I need help.
Yeah.
And because I'm brushed to the side, it's like, well, I don't actually get the help that I need. I don't get the support that I need. And so anyway, it's, yeah, just that destigmatization of this stuff is so crucial. And I
Hmm.
appreciate, the way that you've legitimately shifted the course and the direction of your life, because you were exposed to this world, and then recognized, like, I'm in this now. like
Yeah.
I'm in this
Mhm.
now, and so I'm going to use whatever resources I have access to and whatever I have at my disposal that I can use to shed some light on this, to raise awareness. And I appreciate you, Michael, and
Mhm.
people like you who are, bringing awareness to this world. And again, it is, I mean, it's helping so many people. And I think the more we destigmatize it and open this up, the more people can be helped by this in the long run.
Absolutely. And the suicide rate will continue to come,
Yeah.
well, I shouldn't say continue, will come down. Unfortunately, it's
Yeah.
so bad, I think films like Wounded Heroes and Healing the Heroes and changing the stigma and all those things help bring the
Mhm.
suicide rate down, but a lot more needs to be done so we see significant drop.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Before I let you go, is it okay if I shift gears and ask you about one more thing?
Absolutely.
Not
Yeah.
sure if you still have some time left for me.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm very very curious about this because I heard, I think I might have seen something. It might have been something that you posted. It might have been Dr. Royster mentioned it to me. I can't 100% remember, but help me out here. I believe a while back you went through some kind of an intensive training. If I'm not mistaken, it's a training that SEALs go through. You went through some kind of a training related to human trafficking.
Mm.
Um,
So, yes, I did go through that training. It was a week-long training, and it's not for SEALs. It's actually a SEAL who runs that nonprofit.
Gotcha.
He's
Thank you.
retired Special Forces, and he works with other Special Forces folks. They go in and they rescue trafficked people, and it's a
Mm,
wonderful organization. And yeah, so I went to their week-long training because I wanted to do a film on the topic, and I'm still possibly going to be doing a film on the topic someday.
okay.
My biggest frustration with the whole sex trafficking thing and trying to figure out what I can produce that would be impactful. I don't want to just produce a film about trafficking. I want to produce a film that's going to change lives and help those
Mm,
get out of trafficking. Um, and what I've learned is that once you've been trafficked, especially as an adult, even if you've been in there since you were a child, but they've kept you and you've been in there for a very long time,
yeah,
they can be rescued. And I forget what they told me in the training, if it was like 80% or 90%, very high. They go back to it.
I go back. Yeah,
Yeah, and it's very sad, but you know what? When you get into the whole trafficking, once they have you, they break you down, they destroy you, and then they brainwash you, and before you know it, you think you can't live and exist without them, and you don't
yeah,
you get to a point where you don't realize you're living in a bad, awful lifestyle. You're thankful for anything and everything your pimp gives you. One example is, they were talking about the pimp. She was talking about her pimp and how wonderful he is. She goes, when I'm really good and I make him a lot of money, he'll take me to McDonald's and let me buy whatever I want. That's
mm,
the highlight in her
yeah,
life, and many of them,
yeah,
because they've been so broken, so drugged up, and so
yeah,
brainwashed that they think that's good. And so they can be rescued. They said some 3, 4, 5 times, they still go back.
yeah,
And so, it's like the rescuing part is important, but I don't think I'm going to produce a film on the rescuing part because the success rate of them not going back is so low. So I'm
wow,
trying to figure
wow,
out the best way to really attack this in a positive way is prevention. How do we stop them from getting involved in the first place so they don't ever have to get to a place to where they want to go back even when they're rescued? So it's the prevention. So that's the direction I'm going to go with the film when I produce it. So I've just been getting educated on it, learning about it. I've talked to victims, and you'd be shocked. I don't want to even say here the names I've heard, but politicians at the highest level, from
mm,
girls who were trafficked when they were children, and they don't know each other. They don't know that I was getting training and learning about it. One reached out to me, one I saw somewhere else, but they're completely unrelated. And yet they're giving the exact same names, these political names at the very top of our country, of people that were part of it, and you've got top judges, you've got police chiefs, which I've heard from these people, those
yeah,
who have trafficked. That's why when, Sound of Freedom came out, I believe there was such a push to not get it released. There are too many powerful people who are in that world.
yes,
That's why they don't want to get it released. And these people who are in that world, who are now no longer trafficked, when they tell their story, many of them are still afraid because the people are so powerful. They're afraid they're going to be killed. Um, and these aren't conspiracy theories. These are when you see and talk to these women, it is you just see the devastation in their lives and their stories and the tears. And it sounds so outlandish, though. It does sound like a conspiracy theory. And that's what they use when anybody brings it up to them, like these top
Yeah. Like,
politicians. Oh,
oh,
that's
that's
just a
crazy,
conspiracy
Michael.
theory.
Yeah.
Because it sounds so crazy. But the
Hmm.
reality is, it's not. It has happened. It is happening. And
Yes.
there are very powerful people that want it to continue to happen because of their lusts for, whether they're young children or women and older women. When I say older, over 18, that are trafficked,
Sure.
they want it to continue. And many times, and it's the drug cartels a lot of times that are behind it.
Hmm.
But many times they also will get these people because they blackmail them. They get something, they find something out about them, or they set up
Yeah.
a sting with cameras, or whatever. And all of a sudden, this police chief, all of a sudden we got camera footage of him doing something he shouldn't be doing, and he knows now I'm theirs, or my whole life's
Yeah.
over. And so, judges, same thing. I mean, they're very smart in how they get these powerful people to work for them. And then there are those who are just in there because they're of their lust and wanting this for themselves. That's what's causing some of the biggest problems. It's the number one, I believe it's either one or two, but the fastest growing year after year business, and the billions and
Yeah.
billions of dollars being brought in from sex trafficking. And as many say, the current slave trade today. And yet so much is not being done, and it's
Hmm.
very sad. And so I do hope to produce a film on it someday to help them before they get into it, because it's happening on our streets today.
Yeah.
Young girls are being taken off the streets today and disappearing and being put into the traffic road. It's happening all over the world, but it happens in our
Yeah.
American streets as well. And it's a dangerous,
Yeah.
scary. Social media, is a
Yeah.
great way for them to trap and grab these poor young innocent girls who don't know better. And so prevention is what I'm going to try and do to keep them out of. I think the more people are aware of what their tactics are, that'll help them avoid them, so that they don't get wrapped up in that world.
That's so good. That's so good. Yeah, to comment on a couple of things that you said there. I actually interviewed a survivor
Mm,
named Andrea Valenti, and she was trafficked officially from the time when she was 17 to
mm,
33.
wow.
But she had been sexually abused. I mean, from when she was a 3-year old all the
Mm,
way through.
wow.
And these traffickers, I mean, of course they're out there. I mean, particularly, I know this is how they do it in America anyway. They're targeting, a lot of times they're targeting people that are susceptible. They're kind of a lot of times looking
Yep.
for the low hanging fruit, the people that they can
Absolutely.
influence, that they can psychologically manipulate
Yep.
and abuse. And a lot of times, unfortunately, is it's the pattern. It's like a lot of times it's people that have been abused already that are unfortunately more susceptible to being pulled into that world. Of course it does happen in other unsuspected ways as well, through kidnapping and things like that. I'm not saying that those things don't happen, because they definitely do.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of times it's that psychological
Yep.
manipulation. And one of the things that you said, I also I a little while back I had interviewed a woman named Stacy Efaw, who is she's the executive director of one of these anti-human trafficking organizations, a faith-based one. And she said the exact same thing that you just said. I asked her that question. I said, how many of these people, how many that are being rescued from human trafficking, how many of them go back into it? Is it a big number, small number? She said, if they do not, if they do not actually go through a process of,
Mm-hmm.
through some kind of a program or something,
Yeah.
where they're going to experience healing and it's actually going to help them deal with
Mm-hmm.
their identity issues,
Yep.
she just said emphatically, she said they will go back into it. She didn't
Yeah.
give me the percentage,
Mm-hmm.
but I mean, the way she said it, it's like it's almost everybody that
Isn't that
doesn't
sad?
that
Yeah.
doesn't actually go through that process. I mean, it is because as you mentioned, I mean, somebody's entire identity needs to be restored, because
Yeah.
they've been led to believe, especially for those that have been in it for a long period of time. But I mean, for years they've been manipulated to believe that they depend on this person and that this is actually good for them and this is what they deserve and this is the value of their life and like all this kind of stuff. And like all of that, just you do get brainwashed, you do get the Stockholm syndrome, you do like all that kind of stuff that just goes into it. And I man, I would love it if if you're able to do something there on that kind of preventative side. I mean, this is also, the statistic that they mentioned in the movie of like 2 million new kids a year being sucked into this world of human trafficking. And that
Mhm.
just, just makes me think, well, if so many more are, if it's growing as fast as it's growing, the fastest growing, as you said, criminal enterprise in the world, rivaling the drug trade at this point, like if it's
Yeah.
growing this way, why is it growing? It's growing because there's a demand for it. There's a demand for it
Yep.
because there's a lot of
And do you know
sick
who the number
people
one
out there.
consumer is? You
We
probably
are.
do, right? Yeah, America.
Yeah,
Well,
America.
isn't that I mean, to me, that's shocking and disgusting.
It's
It's just, yeah, and that's
It's
why.
incredible, the scale of it,
Yeah,
and the fact that it is going on all around us in ways that, like, we just don't know. Like, it could be going on in, like, my neighborhood, and I just don't know about it. Like, I mean, who
absolutely.
knows? I live in the Houston area, which is a, very, very big, epicenter for this, in the United States. I'm sure LA is as well. But it's like, yeah, I mean, it's everywhere, and it's so often it's right under our noses, and because of this is the thing that really gets to me, it's because of the level of psychological abuse that goes on. A lot of these people are never discovered because they don't
Yeah.
know how to even, like, run away, to tell somebody, to whatever,
Mhm.
because it's yeah.
Yeah, if they're isolated, and,
Yeah.
what's also sad is they use, good-looking young men, and sometimes just a girl as a girlfriend friend, to get in close, get them to trust them. In case of the
Mm,
boyfriend, become the boyfriend, and they just
yeah.
let their guard down. And as you said, they're going after low-hanging fruit. They're looking for a type, and
Mhm.
then before you know it, they build this bond, this relationship, whether it's a friend to friend or a boyfriend girlfriend, and then they get sucked into the trafficking, and their whole world is devastated. So it's like it's so scary because you can't even trust what you think is a legitimate friendship or a legitimate
Yeah.
relationship with a boyfriend, and you just have to know what to look for. It's sad that Satan is running wild, seriously, and
Yeah.
destroying so
Yeah.
many lives. And so, we need the best thing we can do is pray and
Yes.
then fight the battle, the best way we can. And I try and do it through film. So,
Mm.
you know, uh, yeah, we just have to. It's a big battle. We need to pray against
Yeah.
trafficking because there's just too much. It's just ridiculous what's happening.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I do think there is another aspect of raising awareness that I think is really important because um, you mentioned that that America is the number one consumer of this, and something that maybe not everybody realizes these days is that the pornography industry
Hmm.
is so tied to this that a lot of the
Absolutely.
people in these pornographic films are themselves being trafficked.
Hmm.
That a lot of the one thing that again came out from speaking with people that work in this area that I did not know is that strip clubs. They said probably 85% of the women up on the stages, platforms in strip clubs that are being trafficked.
Hmm.
That blew my mind because I didn't realize it. But it's like we're I mean just so many people in our society are participating. It's kind of like the blood diamond thing, like
Yeah.
like where
Yeah.
it's like without even maybe realizing it or being the ones that are uh like doing the things, but we're somewhere along the line, if you're participating in those activities, like you're moving the needle, like you're part of it.
Absolutely.
And so
Yeah.
it's just so dark, and it's like so many people are it's are involved in it to some degree without even realizing that it's happening. And I think the
Hmm.
more, if we could build awareness around that, I would imagine, I would hope anyway, I keep saying this, but I would hope that
Yeah.
there are a lot of, like, they just talk about men. I know it's not only men, women do it too, but it's like I would hope that there's a large number of men in this country that would like maybe not do it anymore if they knew.
Mhm.
Or I don't know. Maybe that's naive. I don't know, but it's like if the awareness on that side of it, I feel like is
Yeah.
maybe could be helpful. Of like, hey, by the way, you're participating in something
Yeah.
that, you know, if we want to talk biblically, morally, whatever, like you shouldn't be doing it anyway. But you
Right.
know, but you're participating in something that you might not even realize, like you're actually helping to perpetuate a system
Mhm.
that's based on greed, that's based on a bottom line, that's an industry, and it's based on people being exploited against their will.
Yeah. And the other thing to consider, especially with well, actually with pretty much everything, but especially porn, is that they say a lot of people when they start it, there's nothing innocent about it, obviously, it shouldn't be
Mhm.
done, but you're just watching normal porn. But then eventually that just doesn't satisfy what you're
Correct.
enjoying. And so then it gets worse and worse and worse. And then many of the people who became sexual predators for children and were interviewed later, they don't even know how they got there, except it just started with them watching regular porn.
Yeah.
And it just got to a point where all of a sudden that's the only thing that worked for them to watch when I was children. That was the next step. Eventually, it took a while to get there, but they got there because they started watching what they considered no big deal. It's just, man and
Yeah.
woman doing what they do.
Mhm.
And so really, again, it's just don't do it in the first place because it will
Yeah.
lead down that path for some. But no, regardless, it's bad for all.
Yeah, for
you know?
sure. Yeah. Yeah, it's true that that lust doesn't stay satisfied for long, and it
Yeah,
does, you know, increasingly want more, and for some people it does get darker. You know, it gets
yeah.
progressively darker until it's
Hmm.
yeah, as you said, in that place of like how did I end up here?
Yeah.
But yeah.
And it's so sad. I mean, I guess it's okay to say this, but I feel bad for some of them. I'm glad they were caught, and they're gonna have the consequences of being caught and doing what they did. What's sad again is the person, in my opinion, and probably yours, behind it is Satan, who loves to
Mhm.
destroy lives.
Yeah.
And I feel bad that they got wrapped up in what they consider just simple lust. And then before they knew it, it snowballed, and they're in this hole of going, "How did I get here?" But it's just
Yeah.
the stupidity of opening the door and allowing Satan in, period, and just watching that first time. That was where they went wrong. And then he just took it from there. And he just eventually destroyed their lives. And so, I'm glad there's going to be consequences. I'm glad they're off the streets and they're no longer doing it. I do have a part of me that also feels bad for them, But,
Mm,
I just
mm,
pray they get forgiveness in the sense that they ask for forgiveness, that God uses it to bring them to him. Because, anything can be forgiven because of what Christ did for us on the cross.
yeah.
But, it's an awful situation for everybody involved, and Satan's behind all of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Man. Well, Michael, look, I really do. Again, I appreciate your time. I'm thankful that people like you exist, and you know, that use in whatever capacity it might be. In your case, as you said, it's films, documentaries, it's you know things of that nature. But people like you that use the resources at their disposal and use their talents and use their giftings and use their creativity to you know make the world better place, as cliche as that sounds. But I do appreciate the work that you're doing and your heart, you know, in all of this. And so keep doing it, man. Keep up the good work. Keep making awesome stuff. And again, just appreciate you, brother.
Hey, thank you. Thank you for having me again. Appreciate it.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. I hope we get to do it again
Great.
someday soon. And you guys, thank you guys for joining us. Thanks for checking out this episode. Really, really appreciate you all so much for being here and taking the time. Please check out those resources. You can visit michaelgier.com. You can visit 220.org. And I'll make sure that there's some notes in the show notes of the podcast as well. And yeah, just appreciate you guys and see you next time. God bless.